then I'm at the host. Do I need to do things or do I do the host back to you?
Just keep streaming. It's fine. For the reason of hang out a little.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Think we're okay to start? Keith, you're okay? We'll find out, right?
And the light is on. Should be okay. Welcome to the regular meeting of council. Held today is September 22nd, 2020 at 4:45 p.m. Meeting to order.
Keith,
We'll have a moment of silence.
his microphone's too high. It's breaking up on the. Are you saying volume? No, volume's fine. It's breaking up because it's not voice activated. I think it needs to be lowered.
I have a motion by Municipal, seconded by Untitled. Be it resolved, the agenda for the regular meeting of council held on September 22nd, 2020, beginning at 4:45 p.m. be approved as circulated to all members of council, with the addition of a closed session item to be listed as 13.2, Heritage North requested purchase.
All in favor? Motion carried. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? Councilor Eichelhoff.
In closed meeting 13.2 here at North. All right.
Okay. Duly noted. No other declaration. Councilor Adams, please.
Same 13.2 here at North.
Thank you, gentlemen. Additions and delegations. Welcome to our MPP from Randolph. Go ahead, Dan.
Sorry.
The mayor's. No, it should be fine. Just mute me.
Can you hear me, folks? Okay, I can barely hear you. There's a lot of feedback. So Would you like me to continue?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Oh. Okay, so I think that they're having some difficulties. I don't think they can hear us. I think they need to actually put themselves on mute in order for them to hear us.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, they tried to describe it earlier, but yeah.
You can just guide me through it.
It's mute though. Try that.
Mr. Vantoff, can you start speaking in 5 seconds?
Okay.
Mute it.
Mr. Vantoff, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
We'll just need you to nod for a sec. Okay, so then I'm going to mute myself and then you start speaking in 5 seconds.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Perfect. Okay. So thank you very much for inviting me to your council meeting. I really appreciate the invitation. Got a call from Mr. McGee. I'm hoping that we can do this. You forwarded me your briefing books from AMO. I'm hoping that we can do this in a question and answer format. That way you can actually ask me what you want to hear. And the first thing, I'd just like to talk a little bit about what's been happening at Queen's Park. As you were very likely aware, the number one issue right now is the possible or not possible, the resurgence of COVID across the province. So today we hit a record for a lot of, I believe it was 478 cases. There's a few controversial things happening. Basically, the government has gone back to a province-wide approach as opposed to regional. And there are two trains of thought on this, but it does, in my opinion, considering that our area and the health unit has done a really good job and the people have done a really good job, it does hurt us that that the government has gone away from a regional approach and back to a provincial approach. It's also very confusing right now for schools because you can't have a private gathering of more than 10 people, but 30 kids in a classroom seems to be okay. And that is one that I don't know how to explain away. And that is causing, in our opinion, a bit of lack of confidence in where the government's going. That's basically what's happening at Queen's Park right now. You may be aware, and I saw in your briefing books, you had some discussions with the Minister of Long-Term Care regarding the Tech Pioneer residents. There are 2 homes right now that are in crisis. One home in Ottawa, they've had 11 deaths. And again, there is concern that some of the lessons that should have been learned from the first wave haven't been learned. So are we capable with the technology to ask questions? Like, I can just keep going, but if you have, I would prefer if you ask questions of what you initiated the meeting. I would prefer if you ask questions of what you wanted to talk about. Hearing.
We're gonna pick up on this thing.
Hearing no response.
Going to ask questions?
I would prefer if you would ask questions and we could talk about what you guys want to talk about.
Okay, so we're gonna wait till the end to ask questions, so we're gonna flip it back to you, Mr. Bancroft.
Okay, well then, I guess since you forward me, I'm just gonna basically go through the one thing I'd like to talk about first is our office in Kirkland Lake. We are hoping to get it open in September. I don't know if that is going to work. Each office, it has to be inspected through the legislature, and that won't be happening for another, I believe we're scheduled about 2 weeks from now. So it will be inspected by Zoom to make sure that both the staff and the people coming in are safe. And we don't know yet if it will be open again, at what point by walk-in. Like when we do reopen, it will be by appointment. We are working, we're fully staffed, we're working, some of my staff are working from home, some are working in one of the offices in a rotating basis. So if you call the phone number, we do the same amount of work, but we're not open for incoming traffic yet. So I went through your briefing book from AMO. I would like to commend council, first of all, for actually using, there are advantages to presenting virtual. I know sometimes it's technology is a pain. I personally prefer in-person meetings, but virtual does provide an opportunity for at a much lower cost, and you can provide a much wider reach. And I'd like to commend Kirkland Council for doing that at this year's Association of Municipalities of Ontario. I went through your briefing book and you met with a lot of ministers on a lot of different issues. And I would like, that's why I was hoping for questions, because I would like you to prioritize which issues you want us to work, want us to focus on. Like we're perfectly happy to talk about each one. And I appreciate that you did a great job talking to the ministers, but I was hoping you'd be able to prioritize which ones that you wanted me to focus on. Is that possible?
John, we can get that to you. I'm not quite prepared to present that to you today.
Okay, but is there any issue that you would like to make? Like I can go through each minister who you met with, but if you want the how we do this is up to you.
Somebody say something. Muted.
Well, I'm not, I don't know, I'm not hearing anything back. So I think I will just start, and I should have asked how much time we have. I think I'll start, I think with where I'd like to focus on is you made a presentation regarding Tech Pioneer residents to the Minister of Long-Term Care. And you brought up some really good points of how you incur extra costs because it's a municipal facility. And I think I would be, I'm hoping that when you get a response from the minister, we can work together on that. Actually have a pretty good relationship with all the ministers. I don't agree with many of their philosophies, but it's part of our job to maintain a relationship and work together where we can. And you brought up quite a few good points on the Tech Pioneer residents. And because there is such now a focus on long-term care, and it's known or that the municipally owned homes have a pretty good record, but obviously the cost is pretty high, and that is, I looked through your budget report and the cost is fairly high to your municipality too. So I would be interested in hearing what response you get from the Ministry of Long-Term Care, and we'd be happy to follow up on that and see if there's something that we could do. This isn't a, how do I put this? That issue isn't something that we would ever put in, that would never make it to question period or not. This is the kind of thing that you talk one-on-one to the ministry. You know, we're not out to make enemies here. We're not out to score political points. This is something that we're trying to work on for the benefit of all. Another one that I picked out. Okay, you applied for the connecting link for 66. And I saw in the briefing book you applied already a couple times, have been denied a couple times. The connecting link money is compared to how much money, how much backlog there is for infrastructure. The connecting link pot isn't very big, but that doesn't, just because the pot is small doesn't mean it's not worth continuing to put pressure. And again, if you would like me to speak to Minister Mulroney, I have no problem with that. I deal with her a lot. Another one I saw that in your briefing book, you had the community safety and well-being plan that you'd spoken to Minister Jones. And I do believe I was at a couple of Temiskaming TMAG meetings where Kirkland was also present, where the mayor was present, and it was same issue came up. Again, that's an issue that I don't mind that one, it makes sense to make, I do believe that we need a community safety plan. I'm not going to say we don't need one, but we have to look very closely at what organization and what size is the best to do that. You don't want to have 3 separate plans for 3 separate areas that should maybe be in one, or have 5 different organizations making plans that could be, if they work together, if we work together, would make one better plan. So that's one. You made a lot of presentations at AMO regarding the contribution that KL makes to the Ontario economy, and I'd like to thank you for that. One of my biggest challenges representing Temiskaming Cochrane is actually, for many, they don't know where it is. And many people here in the bureaucracy don't appreciate what we do contribute, and specifically what Kirkland contributes. It's very frustrating, and I read in your presentation as well, that here successive governments have only wanted to talk about the Ring of Fire as for mining development, as opposed to mining developments that are already there, like Kirkland. Right, and Kirkland has got, I believe you had how many years and we might find more in this area. And it is frustrating that the Ring of Fire is something, you know, far into the future, fairly far into the future. And the Ring of Fire has still got quite a few challenges before we get there, despite what this government or what previous governments have said. And Kirkland has been there in the past. And although you've fallen on hard times, but you're back. And you're back for a long time. And I think that's something that the government needs to continue to hear. And I'd like to commend you for doing that. Let's see. You presented to Minister Clark about smart city platform, community safety. The one you presented also to Lisa McLeod regarding the Museum of Northern History. That's also something that we could, if you want to pursue that further, I have no problem talking to the minister and going further with that. And the one that, and I think it's a bit stickier one is you presented to Minister McNaughton regarding labor relations and arbitration. And that is a stickier one. I really, when employees don't have a right to strike, I don't know how you're going to get around. Honestly, I don't know how you're going to get around the arbitration issue. That's, I don't know if you want more detail than that. Like I said, I'm hoping that I have some really tough questions because that's when we will have the best discussion. And pardon me just for a second.
Thank you, John. You get some of the hot spots that we had in our presentation. The process went very well. We did get, I would say, some positive feedback on some of the things that we were looking to see done. So we'll wait and see if those promises come through.
Okay.
I leave it open to my fellow councillors if they have any other questions or comments. Appreciate the work that you're doing and you taking the time this afternoon to speak with us under technical difficulty that we got there. So it's open to the other councillors. Any comments or questions, Councillor Evans?
John, we definitely need help with the museum. That is a priority for this council. We have help us with that. The costs are stifling for communities such as Kirkland Lake.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to help on that. We need help with Northern College getting some, allowing them to do some programs that they don't currently do in Kirkland Lake related to mining.
Okay.
There's lots of people that have to go out of town to take courses in either Timmins or Sudbury. And we have a college sitting right here, and they spend money to take NORCAT or Common Core courses in other communities, and have a school sitting here that doesn't offer those courses. Those are a couple of things that I can ask you for help on. Appreciate it.
I think
If do you find that, if I may, on the Northern College issue, do you find that courses are bleeding to other campuses of the college? I know it's a tough question, but can you hear me? Wave if you can hear me. Hello? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I'm just waiting for them to confirm. I'm just trying to make sure you don't take off on us.
Oh, I'm not going to take off on you. Don't worry.
They're trying to figure out the technology at their end and they're trying to streamline it. So just
I
hold
was
tight.
hoping, just the back and forth questions, like, but
Yeah, it's too bad it's not going great because I know that this is a great opportunity for them.
but anytime, right? If they have like, as long as I know, anytime they have a question, just shoot me a phone call or an email, and I'm happy to. I try not to be hard to get.
Yeah, that's great. We'll see if they can chime in there. I'll put myself back on mute and see if they figured it out.
Okay, John, I was kind of mumbling to myself there earlier. The lips were moving, but nothing was coming out at your end probably. I think one of the things to add on to Councillor Ivanoff's message about the college and introducing additional programs, that's a big issue with us, or a priority, I would say. Get more bumps in the seats in the college for sure, but at the same time, it's getting more programs that relate to the trades and skilled labor. And ever since basically the trades have been taken out of the high schools, there's nothing much left. There's such a huge shortage in Northern Ontario. Timmins has complained about the same thing. It's difficult to get skilled labor, and we've got to get back to the basics. Expand those apprenticeship programs that seem to dried up. So that's one thing we would appreciate, anything that you could do, John.
Okay.
Hopefully you heard that.
Yep.
Councilor Rollins.
Yeah, hi, John. I watch a lot of news, and I know there's an incredibly high amount of money going to the Nipissing, right? In the provincial government. And in Kirkland Lake, as of late, we haven't been that successful in receiving government funding. I don't know if it's something we're doing wrong or whether we're on a blacklist, but Marks Day Warren got enough money to do their virtually every street in town. Our streets are terrible. There's no way we can attract people to move to Kirkland Lake when you can't drive on the streets. And in fact, if you come up before the snow, I would like to invite you to go for a drive with me. Because, and I'll take you in my little Honda so you can get the full effect. But we just don't seem successful in getting the grants. And I know some of it's political. That's fine, that's acceptable. Well, it's not fine, but that's the way it is. I'm wondering if there's, if there's any way you can raise their profile or do something for us so that when we apply for grants, it will have a higher percentage of chance of getting it. It's a real concern. We can't afford, ratepayers of Kirkland can't afford to redo the sewers and water lines and the road surfaces and the curbs. We drastically need help, and with Kirkland Gold going for at least another 20 years, bar some unexpected event, it's only going to get worse. Thank you.
If I could respond to that. So we keep,
John, can you hear me? John?
can I respond to that? Can you hear me?
Yeah, speak.
Okay, perfect. So I'd just like to respond to that. So we do keep close tabs on how much money goes where.
Hey, just put,
Not specifically from the MTO, because that's just too big a machine. So we do check with NOHFC, others, to make sure that that if there are grants, that they're fairly well distributed. I don't think that Kirkland Lake or Temiskaming Cochrane is on the blacklist, because one of the places that you mentioned is actually in Temiskaming Cochrane that got money for the roads. But we will do what we can to make sure that we'll need to work together to make sure that your issue stays in the government's line of sight. Because one thing I think the argument we can make, and you made it very well, Rick, is that Kirkland Lake is going to be an economic engine for the province, is and will be in the future. But to do that, you need to be able to provide the services in the town of Kirkland Lake, including roads, including water and sewer, and you're going to need some serious help with that, especially with the conditions that you face in Kirkland Lake, right? Like when anything in Kirkland Lake, because it's hard rock mining town, but it's hard rock whenever you build something too, and that's big money. So we will have to make sure that we work together to make sure the government remembers that.
John?
Yeah.
In regards to forest management, you are very familiar with attending all the TMA meetings. And as we speak, Temagami is one of the districts or areas that is applying for an enhanced forest management program, which includes the municipalities and the indigenous people and the forestry companies. We made a presentation, about 6 or 7 mayors from the Timmins area, Cochrane area, plus Kirkland Lake and Bathurst. It seemed to go on deaf ears, and I don't think it's getting through to the minister. Kind of question mark, put him on the spot, but he did promise to meet with us. I think you're probably a little more aware of what's going on in Temagami as to whether that's going to, well, we can't say if it's going to happen or not, but it would only be the second district in the province that has that enhanced forest management situation. So we'd like to explore that idea.
Yep.
And any assistance we can get from you, we'd appreciate it.
I spoke to Minister Yakubuski this morning on another issue, and I don't mind approaching him on this one. The one caveat I will give to that, and I'm trying to keep this as open and upfront as possible. The government has put forward a proposal regarding forestry. It's very aggressive, and the vast majority, I think, we could live with, but several First Nations communities are raising concerns that they weren't consulted, and we are concerned about that, because if that is the case, then that actually will slow things down instead of speed things up. So I'm happy to keep you posted on that. And that is not the First Nations around Temagami, but they First Nations act as, and rightfully so, act as a unit, and that might come back to bite the government. They are very jobs focused, and I don't blame them for that. So are we. But that one might come back to bite the government a little bit, and we're hoping that it doesn't hurt the industry, and but we're not 100% sure of that. But I'm happy to talk to Minister Yakubuski about the Temagami forest. It is one thing I have learned in this job. Two things about, if we just talk about Temagami for a second. Temagami is, so when I first became MPP and they ask you where I talk, it's my job to kind of be your, for lack of a better word, ambassador in the halls of Southern Ontario. And they ask you where you're from, or who you represent. And if you say, well, I'm in between North Bay and Timmins, and their eyes glaze over. In Toronto, one of the few places they recognize is Temagami. But that's both a blessing and a curse, because Temagami has also a reputation regarding environmentalism, and a lot of good projects, it takes too long, because there's just a hesitancy to deal with anything that is attached to Mogami. And that is both a blessing and a curse for anything in that area. And it kind of cascades into both communities, north and south. Next question.
That's it.
Is that it? Well, can you still hear me? If I could just in closing.
But we were looking for help on it, and we appreciate you in particular. You're always there when we call. You attend all the meetings in the district, more so than a lot of politicians have done in the past. So I personally, I want to thank you for that. But on behalf of council, thank you for addressing us today.
Yeah, and if I could just thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. And please, if you anything, any question, just shoot me an email, give me a call. You have my phone number, Mayor, and we will work on it as a team, as we should. Right? There's a time in Northern Ontario. There's a time for politics, and that's usually every 2 or 4 years, and the rest of the time we all work together for the benefit of all our residents. And we've always done that in the past, and we will continue to do that in the future. So thank you for the invitation. And my door, or at least right now, because of COVID, my phone is always open. My door might not be, but it will be again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
So a motion moved by PC White, seconded by PC Owen. Be it resolved that the delegation by PC John Bancroft be received.
All in favor? Motion carried. Acceptance of minutes and recommendations.
Motion moved by Patrick Adams, seconded by Rick Owen. Be it resolved that be it resolved that council accept the minutes of the following meetings. Minutes of the regular meeting of council held September 8th, 2020.
All in favor? Motion carried. Reports of municipal officers and communications. COVID update. We'll start with CAO, Rick McGee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to council. Staff wishes we had better news with respect to the COVID-19 update. Unfortunately, it appears that we are entering the second wave of COVID-19. We want to express our accommodations to the people that have worked extremely diligent in the north to prevent the spread of COVID, but also extend to them the challenge that we must be even more vigilant than we have been in the past as we enter flu and cold season. We must all do our part, work hard, practice social distancing, hand washing, wearing of face coverings and masks. And we'll go through the same order with Ms. Loach leading off, followed by Ms. Sackrider, Mr. Orman, and Mr. Hobbs to update the various areas and portfolios, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions. Ms. Loach.
Thank you, Mr. McGee. We continue to do staff surveillance swabbing every 2 weeks. We did receive direction from the ministry to change visitation guidelines. That was received in early September. Residents are now allowed 1 visitor in their room. The visitor must attest to having a negative COVID swab within the last 14 days. They must wear a surgical mask provided by the home at all times and must maintain a 2-meter distance when visiting. Residents are also allowed short-term absences with family. They're able to leave the home wearing a surgical mask at all times, maintain a 2-meter distance while away from the home, they will be screened upon return. Overnight absences are permitted, however, the resident must be isolated for 14 days upon return. For this reason, we have been discouraging such absences, and to date, we have not had any requests for overnight absences. We are prepared for wave 2, and we remain COVID-free at this time. Thank you. On to Ms. Sackler.
Thank you very much, Ms. Loach. With the most recent provincial announcement this past Saturday, we have received confirmation that we can continue to host private attended rentals up to 50 people at our facilities if physical distancing of 2 meters can be maintained. However, at this point, we are no longer accepting room-based birthday parties at the community complex. A meeting of ice use groups at the community complex will take place tomorrow evening with the intent of identifying return to play dates so that the installation of the ice can be confirmed. As we've already heard, the number of cases, 478 reported this morning, is on the rise. So is the number of tests being completed provincially. And as we've again heard, we do encourage everyone to stay home when you're sick. Make sure you continue to wash your hands, maintain your 2 meter distance. If you are not able to maintain the 2 meter distance, make sure you are wearing a mask and be true to your family and your social circle. Thank you, and over to you, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Ms. Sackler. From an operational perspective, we're just continuing to follow the reports. So an update for $4 per hour premium each monthly installment wrapped up in August, and the final reports that we submitted for September 25th. Similarly, TPR is preparing cost analysis of additional costs for funding the fees. The municipality continues to look for other opportunities and anticipates jumping in on Apple grant opportunities and technology grants. That's over to Mr. House.
My report reflects better the period between July and September, as obviously the announcements that are coming out now will be changing everything. The economy did experience a year-over-year growth. Ongoing surveys, as was saying, ongoing surveys are being conducted to assess what the COVID impact on businesses. The last one was done in July, published in August. 35 respondents, 67% of businesses have reopened. They were still going through the reopening process at the time of the survey. 46% say that COVID has had a low impact on their business. 53% estimate the cost to be around $20,000 to the businesses. About 24% say that the cost would be between $20,000 and $50,000. Greatest impact is the additional costs associated with cleaning and compliance. How many businesses have used government supports? Approximately 40%, mostly the wage and the relief benefits. Labor impact, 23% report needing more employees. Towards this end, there will be a virtual job fair conducted in Kirkland, October 14th and 15th, as been shared with the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hawes. That concludes our report on COVID-19 update, Your Worship. Happy to answer any questions and also just reinforce to all residents that with Thanksgiving coming up in the next few weeks, we have to practice strong social distancing. Take the time to relax, don't travel, stay home, and visit your family virtually for a COVID-safe Thanksgiving weekend. Thank you, Worship.
We have a motion to accept the COVID-19 update.
A motion to accept Casey Owen, seconded by Stacey White, be it resolved that the verbal update entitled COVID-19 update be received.
All in favor? Motion carried. Item 6.2, bylaw enforcement policy review. Ms. Bilodeau.
Can you hear me?
No, okay.
Perfect, thank you. Through your worship, we are bringing a report to council regarding the bylaw enforcement policy review. So this was requested at time of passing about a year ago for it to come back to council for consideration again, just to make sure that the bylaw policy actually reflected what enforcement is doing on the ground. So at this point, there's a few minor updates that I think are worth implementing, and they are reflected in the report. So I won't go through them unless council wishes me to. And we did attach the policy with the track changes to the document, so everyone is capable of seeing where those changes are being proposed. So at this point, I'll leave it to council to ask any questions if they have any, or if they need any further clarification.
Ashley, can you give us just a brief overview of those changes for the benefit of the public? Brief, that is.
Yeah, just confirmation that you can hear me. Sorry, just confirmation that you can hear me. Yes, okay, perfect, thanks. So the three major changes, we have a new complaint process. So there is an ability to complain now online. So there's no need for a separate form to be submitted to the town of Kirkland Lake for processing. Everything can be done either by phone or the online form that's available on the main page. So we made sure that the policy referenced that. The second part was the removal of reference to council in the policy, and that's just to line ourselves with the April 21st report that went to council regarding an unencumbered bylaw enforcement process. And then the third major, not major, but more significant change is the reference to permission to enter onto a property. So it's just a suggestion that we remove that from the policy, as the bylaw is actually contradictory to it. So those were the three things. Other than that, we modified the policy to reflect our new policy template and relocated where the definitions were in the policy so that they were upfront versus later on in the report or in the policy.
Okay, as Bill noted, just a comment on the new user form. It is pretty slick. It's not hard to use. You don't have to be a high-tech individual, so I encourage the public to use that process. I've used it myself and was quite impressed, honestly, so it's working well. Any further questions? None noted, we have a motion.
The motion was by Nina Hycroft, seconded by Patrick Adams. Be it resolved that report number 2020-040 entitled Bylaw Enforcement Policy Review be received. That Council for the Corporation of the Town of Kirkland Lake hereby approves the revised bylaw enforcement policy as presented, and that staff be directed to insert the approved policy into the corporate policy manual and upload the bylaw enforcement policy to the town website.
All in favor? Motion carried. Item 6.3, Municipal Law Enforcement Officer Appointment. Ms. Bilodeau.
Sorry, just going to confirm again that you can hear me at this point. Perfect. Okay, so through your worship to council, this report has to do with appointing a municipal law enforcement officer for animal control bylaw. So after looking over the file and going through previous bylaws that have been passed, it doesn't appear that Tracy Barb has been appointed by bylaw as a municipal law enforcement officer, which means that she can't legally be ticketing. So there has been tickets issued. However, if they were ever to be fought, they technically we would not win in a court of law. So we want to make sure that we put her name down as a municipal law enforcement officer, so we appoint her, and then further ticketing can be taken to the court level and not be challenged. Sorry, are there questions for council at all?
Motion moved by Rick Owen, seconded by Casey Owen, be it resolved that report number 2020-050 entitled Municipal Law Enforcement Officer Appointment be received, and that a bylaw to appoint Tracy Garber as Municipal Law Enforcement Officer be presented to council.
All in favor? Motion carried. Item 6.4, draft consent application to do with the Jameson Grenville Road property.
All right, just going to confirm again that you can hear me. Sorry, just confirming again that you can hear me. Okay, well, I'll start through your worship to council. We did receive a request a request for comments from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And essentially what they do when they receive a planning application for consent, which is essentially a lot creation, they circulate to the abutting municipalities or organized townships to get comment on whether we are in agreement of a new lot being created or not. So this is a provincial requirement that they need to abide by. From a planning perspective, I'm not entirely convinced that this meets the provincial policy statement, as development is supposed to be directed within urban settlement areas. We've gone through this process before, so I think the last time a report was brought to council for consideration was in 2016, and it was for development on Round Lake. And at that point, the direction from council was to provide no comment. In years prior to that, we received direction from council to deny all development within the surrounding areas because it plays a toll on our infrastructure. We've also played the opposite end where new lot creation actually stems further economic development in our region. So you're playing with which one's the better scenario to be in, whether we're attracting people to the area and generating better economic development, or it places a burden on our municipal infrastructure and they're not contributing to our tax base. So at this point, the recommendation from staff is to actually have the province conduct a comprehensive review to determine whether or not there is any impact on our facilities and on our infrastructure by allowing development to take place in the unorganized township. The second recommendation, and this is something again that was presented back in 2016 for council's consideration, was to look at the potential establishment of a planning area. So a planning area is it's an area that'll be designated in our official plan. However, it controls certain aspects of unorganized townships so that we can see development happen in a way that's compatible with Kirkland Lake. So not saying that that is the right way to go, but maybe exploring it would be a good option, and to start that process off to allow the province to meet with the local service board and us to start having those conversations. So I will take questions if there are any.
One question, just to clarify. This particular request that's in front of us, does this include it as more of a recreational property, which could include like a trailer park?
Sorry, I'm not sure if you can hear me just yet, but through you to council, what happens in the unorganized township is that when you get the property, the lot creation can happen with the intent of a seasonal residence, which is compatible with the provincial policy statement. The problem is once the lot has been created, there's no control on what happens on that property. So it's one thing to tell the ministry, yeah, it's going to be for seasonal residential, but at the end of the day, I mean, there's no provincial, or the provincial authorities aren't checking to see if it's compliant with anything, because there is no zoning bylaw. There's no zoning bylaw, there's no official plan, there's nothing that governs what is allowed to take place on that property. The only thing that will come into play would be their ability to get a septic permit and whether MOE is triggered if it's over 10,000 liters. So if it gets big enough, then they'd have to start getting approvals from the Ministry of the Environment. So the unorganized township is different. Again, you don't know, even though you're allowing for it to have seasonal residents to happen on a lot, they could kind of do what they want to do once they get the severance completed.
Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Little. Any other questions or concerns? We have a motion.
Motion moved by Stacy White, seconded by Rick Owen. Be it resolved that report number 2020-10-048 entitled Draft Consent Application Number 54-C-209966, Jameson Burnsville Road, be received, and that staff be directed to respond to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing on behalf of the town of Kirkland Lake to advise the ministry that the town opposes any new development in unorganized townships as a consequence of CPS, and until such time as the following recommendations are addressed. Number one, that the province conduct a comprehensive review to determine whether development in the unorganized township places an undue strain on public service facilities and infrastructure of surrounding municipalities, and that the province meet with local road boards and the town of Kirkland Lake to determine the potential of developing a planning area.
All in favor? Motion carried. Item 6.5, RFT 558 Old Lake Shore Road Accounts and Resurfacing. Mr. Riverdale, Director of Public Works.
For you, your worship council, we've issued the end of the resurfacing of Lake Shore McKennis. We've received 2 tender submission. One was Miller Paving and Interpaving. Miller was the lowest tender for this tender. So we were trying to resurface these 2 streets. It's been a while. It was a lot of work. The water and wastewater infrastructure was replaced in 2012, and there's some crossover in that project, the rock removal, that did not allow to complete this resurfacing of these streets, and there were some plans in place to continue even further at that point. So basically, the scope of the project will be applying for travel, readjusting manholes, and replacement of super paving for this project. We are requesting to award this tender to Miller Paving at a sum of $130,948.61. This is basically a subset letter with some contingencies in place. So we have budgeted $180,878 in this account number. So looking at probably using the additional funds to continue some of the work that could be done this year. Some gravel roads. I looked at the same lane as one of the streets, which is gravel. It is a 400 meters stretch of road. The average annual daily traffic is 200 on that road. I just made calculation on the resurfacing, just the asphalt itself, and we're way above the amount that's left in the account. I'm looking at $89,000 just for resurfacing. That does not include gravel resurfacing section, just a small section of it, just to be within this $50,000. The one item that I would have to address, and I was just removing the asphalt to address this road section that we're looking at. There is, you know, the average annual daily traffic on this road section between here is 780 vehicles a day. So it's highly on the road. So these could be concentrations in these spots. But further review would be taking place.
Certainly the people on Lake Shore will be very, very happy. They've been waiting 7 or 8 years. So that's good news for them. So this is within our budget. It's nice that it came in lower than we had budgeted for. I think you're correct. There's a lot of unfinished areas that were torn up and not repaved or fixed in the area as well. But in particular, when you cross the railway tracks at Tweedsmuir, close to McPhee, it's in pretty rough shape. It's a school area, and as you mentioned, there's just a lot of traffic. So it does need, there are a lot of areas in town that need the same help. But, I mean, we certainly have to look at the high traffic areas from a safety factor as well. Comments, Councillor Collins.
There are sections of 4th and Yonge Street that have paved in years, and other parts of the town were lifted asphalt and put down this weird gravel that started to pack, but all of a sudden it's very loose again. Are these sections of roads that can be fixed with whatever's left over, or are they not even on the list for this year?
We could review every option that's out there, but there is a limited funds. Sometimes, you know, spending some dollars just to do a patchwork, sometimes they may not be warranted. Perhaps we may look at putting those dollars in the reserve and applying it all year to the proper planning. Perhaps that'd be one of the options, but we should look at everything that needs to be looked at. I don't know how hard this road needs to be followed over the years. But in order for us to, we should review all these locations, which one. I would probably address the ones with 5-year volumes. Not trees here is fairly high volume.
Councillor one.
Tweedsmuir has been on my radar for a while. For one thing, the sewer and water lines do not run underneath that road. They're far off to the side. It had previously been included in the budget to be resurfaced prior to this council, and for whatever reason, it wasn't done. I'm wondering if we could not include the resurfacing of Tweedsmuir in our upcoming budget. Now that we have 2 graders, would it not be possible to cut the cost by doing some of the work in-house, because we're only using the graders in the wintertime and let them sit there all summer. I think a grader with the proper blade on it is able to break up and take away the pavement. The volume is obviously there. And with it having a school on that street, I think it should be a priority street for probably at least 20 years, we've had a policy that we're not going to do streets unless we do the infrastructure underneath. Well, unfortunately, all that's happened is that the streets have gotten worse and worse. And the infrastructure hasn't got done either. So I think we're gonna have to revisit that policy sometime in the near future. Thank you.
See you, Ricky. Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, through your council. So the follow-up recommendation of Mr. Roberti is an opportunity to utilize the full extent of the funds that council budgeted in 2020 for asphalt rehabilitation. When the tender prices came in substantially lower than what was budgeted, we wanted to take advantage of that opportunity with a procurement process already put in place and recognizing that there were a lot of locations within the town of Critical Lake where there had been work done, but the rehabilitation of the asphalt hadn't taken place. And quite honestly, going forward, anytime there's a project where asphalt has been removed, there has to be funds allocated to put that asphalt back. That's a minimum urban standards expectation. And in the event that there weren't monies available or there was a hiccup in the budgeting process or rock was encountered, staff would return to council with a report to advise with respect to that. Because it's not acceptable to remove infrastructure that's already in place and then just do nothing about it for 7 years or 10 years or whatever. So if I can recommend to council that if council's happy to support the recommendations and follow up in front of you, what I think you'll see next year as part of the budgeting process is more of a movement toward the asset management plan, where Mr. Roberti and his people will be identifying any areas in the community that are deficient, that were removed and not put back, that will be putting dollar figures in front of that. And then the other thing with respect to any policy, there's nothing wrong with resurfacing roads with infrastructure in them. As long as we're not going to resurface that road 5 years later and have to replace the water pipes. So that's entirely the intent behind the asset management plan, as we align all of the infrastructure from a life expectancy perspective. And we take that into consideration when we're investing, because there's nothing worse, and we totally appreciate the residents and the council do not want to see instances where we repave a road at a cost of $500,000 and 5 or 10 years later, we're taking that road out to replace infrastructure underneath it and cost of millions more. So that's what staff's commitment is moving forward in 2021, is to make sure that we align all of those resources, but also that we take advantage of the funds that council has budgeted, so that we maximize opportunities when prices are low, such as in this instance. So I hope that helps, and we will improve as we go forward from an asset management perspective.
Any other comments from council? Councilor Owen?
Yeah, I don't necessarily expect an answer. But with the overall condition of our roads, I'm wondering, because Queensland's not the only state in town where the hard services are not under the road. Do we have any sort of map that we can locate so that some of these streets that are terrible are relatively short? Some are quite long, of course, but if we know the streets where the hard services are off the side of the road, then we could hopefully set some sort of priority list, especially in areas where we're not doing the curbing. And like I say, we have the 2 graders now, so we should be able to do some of the work in-house, keeping costs down. I mean, otherwise those graders sit all summer, so I'm just wondering if we have any kind of indication.
Mr. Liberty, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a priority list of my understanding. Certainly probably has to be updated under our asset management plan. Is that correct?
There is a road needs study in place. I know that you have done a fair amount of work. I was just going through the documents yesterday. And so we have to go back to this document and review what was done and what can be done next. We have to prioritize, but we do have to do a proper review of these documents in order to proceed.
Yes, probably hasn't been updated for a while. Or
And we do have plans and so on for infrastructure, so water and sewers and the state, so that could be part of the review.
Thank you. Any other comments or concerns? We have a motion.
And yours, there are two motions associated with this. First motion, moved by Patrick Adams, second by Dean Icon. Be it resolved that report number 2020-PW-007 entitled RFP-558-20 Lakeshore Road and McCamus Avenue resurfacing tender award be received. That council hereby award RFP-558-20 Lakeshore Road and McCamus Avenue resurfacing to Miller Paving Limited in the amount of $124,712.87, plus a 5% contingency not to exceed $130,948.51, HSC excluded, and that staff is hereby authorized to execute the necessary documents to complete the terms of RFP 558-20.
All in favor? Motion carried. Motion number 2.
Second motion moved by Patrick Adams, second by Eugene Icon. Be it resolved that staff be directed to negotiate as the same unit prices additional resurfacing of loose top gravel sections of asphalt roads within the municipality on a priority basis determined by the Director of Public Works utilizing the remaining funds in budget account number B 2020-0042 not to exceed $180,878.
All in favor? Motion carried. Item 6.6, municipal drinking water license renewal application. Mr. Riverty.
Through you, your worship council, we're in the process of finalizing the application for our water license. And one of the components is that we have to submit a direct opinion of the water report, financial report. That's part of the 5 components that is required. So our license is basically expiring in April 2021. We do have to submit this application in October, around October 12th. So there's been a number of legislative initiatives affecting the water system management and operation over the past decade. These initiatives were a result of the water reform strategy and walked in 2000. So the Barter report recommended a comprehensive approach to the delivery of safe drinking water in Ontario. So therefore, we have the owners of municipal drinking water are required to apply and obtain municipal drinking water license. So basically, the national plan for the water system was prepared in accordance with the guidelines, complied with the financial plan resolution, regulations, or Ontario Regulation 453/07, made under the Safe Drinking Drinking Water Act to satisfy MECP requirement for the drinking water license renewal. Once the system is licensed, the municipality's financial plan is required to be updated every 5 years. In conjunction with every application for license renewal. Furthermore, financial plan must be approved by resolution of council that indicates that the water system is financially viable. Aqua has prepared that financial plan for the town. So it is made with assumptions and financial plan spending X amount of dollars per year over the term. And that is part of our budget process. So I think we're doing well in that process. So in order to proceed, we need to
Any comments from the council members? No, we have a motion.
Motion moved by Casey Owens, seconded by Casey White. Be it resolved that report number 2020-PW-006 entitled Kirkland Lake Municipal Drinking Water License Renewal Application be received. That council for the corporation of the town of Kirkland Lake hereby accepts that council for the corporation of the town of Kirkland Lake hereby accept the corporation of the town of Kirkland Lake drinking water system financial plan as presented. That staff is directed to submit the updated Kirkland Lake drinking water system financial plan number 214-301, 2019 to 2025, in accordance with OREG 453-07 to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks for the Kirkland Lake Municipal Drinking Water License Renewal, and that staff be directed to upload a copy of the corporation of the town of Kirkland Lake Drinking Water System financial plan to the town website.
I just asked one question. How often do we have to renew that license? What's the normal time frames?
every 5 years.
Thank you. Any further comments? Noted. All in favor? Motion carried. Item 6.7, swim pass donation request. The Secretary, Director of Community Services.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to council. The Chamber of Commerce has requested 200 swim passes for their 2020 Halloween scavenger hunt. Staff do recommend that council approve this request. The value of the swim passes would be $884. There is plenty of room in the annual allocation of the Community Grants Fund. We do feel that this does fit the strategic plan to offer outstanding service and maintaining and enhancing partnerships. We will be able to track the return of these passes, and we can certainly let council know at a later date how many passes were returned. Are there any questions?
Councillor White.
Just for reporting purposes, the actual 800 doesn't come out of the community grant. It's only the amount that actually comes back, correct?
Correct.
I think in view of the pandemic, I should say, that's going on, this is an ideal opportunity to keep kids from off the streets and restricting distances. And it's a good marketing gimmick, but ploy, I'd say, whatever you want to call it. Because some of these people have never used the pool yet, and there'll be an opportunity for them to try it out, and hopefully they will come back. It's certainly a great facility, so fully support this.
Just a further piece of information that I thought I should bring up, Halloween. We have had a number of questions, if you know if Halloween will continue on in Kirkland Lake. And my update that I can give from the Municipal Health Unit call from last week was that they believe that there will be some sort of provincial guidance given on that. And if not, there may be something forthcoming from the municipal health unit. So that was their argument.
Any further comments? We have a motion.
Motion moved by Casey Owens, seconded by Patrick Adams, be it resolved that memorandum number 2020-CS-001, entitled Swim Pass Donation Request be received, and that staff be directed to prepare 200 swim passes for the Chamber of Commerce Halloween Scavenger Hunt and expense the cost of the donation to the Community Grants Fund.
All in favor? Motion carried. Item 6.8, Municipal Asset Management Program Funding and Application. Mr. Berner, Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Your Worship, through your council. Essentially, we're looking for approval tonight to proceed with the grant application. FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, has a pool of funding over the establishment deadline of basically getting on the first round. The funding is 80%, up to $50,000, and we took the opportunity to discuss amongst the team to try to identify what we thought would be most warranted. And we identified with upcoming legislative requirements around paved roads, sidewalks, and similar. There would be a good opportunity to basically do a scanning-based software application of all of our paved roads within the municipality along the streets. Further to that, we looked at a couple of the options. There were plenty of options, as you can see within the proposal. We identified that the traffic component would probably be critical. We're essentially to map up our signage for the town. The data is transferable, we integrate with our existing GIS applications. And we would also purchase tap-on software. And that tap-on software basically collects your data and essentially prioritizes your roads based on an objective, clear, defined process rather than the person manually inspecting and sort of imparting what they believe the condition of the road is. So it's very true unbiased prioritization of our roads and streets and our upcoming repairs. It'll essentially help with the long-term planning and budgeting. It'll allow us to run multiple scenarios, and we think it'll help us meet our legislative requirements quickly in 2021. In order to maximize the funding opportunity, we did ask and request for some additional dollars for training. As you can see, we look around the table, there's a lot of new faces, and we're looking to sort of identify a couple champions and basically build a cross-functional team, if you will, where there are champions of asset management. And it's really a mindset that we want to instill in everybody as we go forward. And so to maximize that funding opportunity, we will look to train several key users within departments to basically become experts and then impart that knowledge across the organization. If there's any further questions, please.
Sorry, Councilor Wade.
Sorry, thank you. So do we have with this work order management system, is it compatible with our existing computer systems?
Thank you, Councilor White. The work order system, we're actually taking a pass on at this time. So we're only looking at the transportation one, we're actually not looking at pavement and your sidewalks. The reason we looked to pass on the work order management, we felt it was a fairly hefty commitment. And we are going under the organizational review, the system strategies, and we just want to make sure that we're maximizing our systems. Plus, when we look at things like technology and software installations, there are other funding envelopes that we potentially utilize for those. But when we get to something as specific as a street scan or that kind of thing, your opportunities might not be as plentiful. So if we were to embark on a order system, we could potentially run an organization on these or something similar.
Okay, and then the follow-up is, there is in a package like a So with what we're proposing to do today, are we getting into a yearly fee situation?
Yes, there is a small fee on an annual basis. Implementation is a one-time cost. The recurring fee for the fee is under $5,000 a year. And it's the sort of thing where we thought we could basically utilize it, what we needed it, and then if we went to a long-term application, essentially that subscription, there's no long-term commitment. So it's one of those things where, talking with the vendor, they had said they had some instances of that, where they basically bridged it to a broader asset management software application, and it basically got them through a lot of that technology at that data analysis in the meantime. So basically, almost looking at it as a fee for service, and because of the low cost, not a lot of them are going to be walking away from the long run.
I do think there's a need for this program because in the past it was fixed equipment program. And over the years, there's been some neglect, especially in the sidewalks, so we have to bring up the standards to meet disability standards that are coming forward. So this is a huge leap to get this under proper management, asset management. Councilor Owen?
Yeah, I appreciate that there's a fee to intellectual property. With that fee, we get a support services as well, or is that strictly a licensing fee?
I believe as part of your implementation, they'll help bridge that over, they are collecting your data, and then it's within their application, so I believe the finished product. Where we'll basically provide inputs into the software, help them shape their budget and their priorities, and then we'll basically train us and teach us the modeling aspect of that.
Any further questions or comments? Council? Noted. Motion?
Motion moved by Eugene Icon, seconded by Casey Owen. Be it resolved that report number 2020-10-006, entitled Municipal Asset Management Program Funding Application be received. That staff be directed to apply for a grant from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program to advance the town's asset management program. And that the town of Crystal Lake allocate up to $15,000 in the 2021 budget as the town's contribution to the cost of this project.
All in favor? Motion carried. Consideration of notices of motion. None noted. Introduction, reading, and consideration of bylaws.
Motion moved by Stacy White, seconded by Rick Owen. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read first, second, and third time. Numbers passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and sealed with corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 20-076, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute documents related to the sale of a property located to the north of 4 Somerset Drive to Mark Robson.
All in favor? Motion carried.
Motion moved by Casey Owen, seconded by Patrick Adams. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read first, second, and third time. Numbers passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and sealed with corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 20-077, being a bylaw to deem lot 1 of registered plan M-218T, not to be registered north of 4 Somerset Drive, Martin Crossing.
All in favor? Motion carried.
Motion moved by Eugene Icon, seconded by Stacy White. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read first, second, and third time. Numbers passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and sealed with the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 20-078, being a bylaw to appoint municipal law enforcement officers for the purpose of enforcing bylaws in the town of Crystal Lake.
All in favor? Motion carried. Questions from council to staff? None noted, although we did get an update from the secretary on the pool, or not pool, but a potential opening, because it was bring up some questions from citizens, so thank you for that. Any notice of motions? None noted. Councilors' reports. I may start on location of our regular council meetings. We have had the last 2 meetings at this location. It does create a lot of extra work and planning to put this on. Obviously, there's some technical difficulties. Some of the equipment that we have doesn't meet the requirements. We've had to borrow equipment. There's additional costs for some staffing. And my understanding is, although we are not opening or promoting the rental of the facilities here, we did refuse, I think, 3 potential bookings, so there's some lost revenue. Councillor Owen and myself had the opportunity of conducting a meeting for the Police Services Board yesterday. And I think when you see the setup, if you haven't seen it, it's meets all the requirements that the municipal health unit in the province has put forth. So I think from a convenience and cost standpoint, and from a staffing standpoint, would be advantageous to go back to the council chambers. Councillor McGee, do you have any comments?
No, Your Worship, I think you covered all of the points you wish to cover.
Thank you. Councillor Owen.
The more important thing to me is to continue our face-to-face meetings. I prefer this location, but as you pointed out, the Police Services Board meeting is enough space at the council table for us to keep our 2-meter distance. If memory serves me correct, every other chair in the audience area is marked as no seating. I talked to one of our residents who's attended meetings both here and in council chamber, and in terms of hearing a meeting, she did not notice a difference one way or the other. The problem is when people have their backs to the audience, which is a problem here, and it's also a problem in council chambers. In light of the added costs, I'm calling on my Scottish heritage now. I have a hard time justifying the added costs because I have a personal preference. So I could sort of reluctantly support moving back to council chambers.
Any other comments from the council? Councillor Evans?
I have just a concern that if this COVID thing continues to expand as it has in the last, I would say, 4 or 5 days, there may we may have to go back to Zoom. Because much as this is referring face-to-face meetings, I think first of all, the John Vantoff meeting would have been better if we had all been on Zoom. It would have been a better meeting, a better opportunity for us to ask questions, and the technology on Zoom is much superior to us sitting here. That would have been a better fit for that particular meeting with John and maybe with Charlie, if that's our next meeting. But I think we're looking 2-3 weeks down the road. We don't know what's going to happen in Ontario, and we may not have an option but to go back to our regular meetings.
You bring up a good point, because we delayed bringing this motion forward to this council meeting in order to get input from council or approval to go back. And that caused basically a 2-week delay. And we may have to act in a prompt manner if the province legislates different or additional restrictions. So with the CEO and the clerk having that ability to switch the meetings over to Zoom would be a definite advantage, because I hate this going back and forth and then having to wait to have another meeting to get out of here. It's time consuming and it could be done in a more quicker fashion. Councillor Adams.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of going back into place, but as long as my 6 and 4-year-old are in my classroom, I will be happy to be together as a group.
I agree. Any further comments? Can you read the motion?
Motion moved by Eugene Icon, seconded by Casey Owens, be it resolved that memorandum number 2020-CNL-005 entitled Council Meeting Location be received, and that future council meetings will resume in council chambers beginning October 6, 2020, or sooner at the call of the chair should the need arise for a special meeting of council.
Any concerns, questions? Motion, or, I'm sorry, all in favor? Motion carried. Councillor reports, updates. Just a compliment to the Works Department, Mr. Ruby, driving around town and seeing a lot of little small jobs being done that we've talked about here today. That's, never really got finished. I see, especially in the federal area where I live, I've noticed it quite a bit. So the Works Department is out there getting these things fixed up, and that's nice to see, because for a while, I would say we were neglecting it, but it wasn't a priority. So it's nice to get those little jobs finished. It makes our town look better and certainly easier to walk and drive around. So please extend that thank you to the workers for a job well done.
Okay, we have a motion moved by Stacey White, seconded by Patrick Adams, be it resolved that the verbal updates for members of council be received.
All in favor? Motion carried. Additional information, 12.1 Royal Canadian Legion request to hang barriers. Banners, sorry, not barriers. We don't want to hold them back. Council has had a chance to look at the request. Is there any concerns or comments? None noted.
Motion moved by Rick Owens, seconded by Eugene Icon, be it resolved that the correspondence from the Royal Canadian Legion dated September 14, 2020 be received. That council approve the request to have staff paint banners on government roads for an additional 3 seasons, and that staff be directed to present a banner policy.
All in favor? Motion carried. Motion to move into a closed session.
Motion moved by Casey Owens, seconded by Stacey White, be it resolved that council move into a closed session pursuant to section 239(2) to discuss 1 litigation matter, 2 land disposition matters, 1 potential litigation matter, and 1 matter involving identifiable individuals.
All in favor? Motion carried. We'll have a couple minutes adjournment.